Welcome, my new modelites, to another round of the Meandering sessions. You just have me today here, Kyrin, as one is off in the fairy dreamland of being a new father. And today is a Meandering sessions where typically we just go into thoughts that have been on our mind, random topics here and there, deep conversations with a lighthearted touch. I'm going to be going deep today, and I'm going to pick a particular topic, this being on the Saturday, 20th of May, and being released a couple of days afterwards. And today's topic is living in the present. What is something that I have not been doing recently? Well, exactly that. So I'm going to start off with a bit of definition and my experiences, get into talking about meditation and perhaps some roadblocks in meditation, resources, why you need to constantly relearn this, maybe some downsides even to living in the present moment before summarizing this all up. So we've got a couple of things to look forward to do today. So first of all, let's have a just discussion, I suppose, about anxiety, about negativity, about getting stuck into, I suppose, negative thought patterns. And this is something that I've done plenty of times in my life, and particularly in my teenage years. I suppose that was a period of my life where I was definitely getting in and stuck into these just awful ways of thinking. I wouldn't call it depression. Depression is a rather loaded term, and I think it has a more physiological aspect to it. And this is where you're looking at actual brain chemistry and seeing how SSRIs and antidepressants and things can actually alleviate that. But it was certainly a period of my life where I wasn't happy. And if you want to know more about depression, try looking up the Noonday Demon book review I did, which I think is a pretty good explanation of what depression actually is. But definitely over the last couple of months, I've been noticing myself slipping into worse thought patterns, and probably what is the biggest thing for me is anger. Anger is typically not something I feel. It's not a usual emotion for me. I'm a relatively passive person, and when I notice myself getting angry at things, this is usually an indication that something's kind of going wrong, and that it's a good warning sign, I suppose, that things aren't all right, and I probably need to look and identify some problems and fix things up. So what in particular has happened to me recently was I was listening to Modern Wisdom, which is a podcast by Chris Williamson, and he talks into a lot of evolutionary psychology, a little bit of culture war stuff, a little bit about dating as well, and we'll see how this ties in soon. And he was talking about not living in the present moment, and I went, damn. This is exactly what I've been doing. I've been living in the past. I've been living in the future, in typically an idealized past and future, which is ridiculous because this tends to crop up all the time. You idealize the past and the future, and not realizing it's going to be pretty much exactly the same as the pain or whatever worries you're having in the moment. And I just went, yeah, damn, all right, I'm living in another time. Or in particular, I think thinking in another time. That might be the better way of putting this. So what is, I suppose, living in the present? And I'm going to probably maybe even change this and start more thinking in the present, because I think that's a better way of phrasing the term. Because living in the present kind of gets tied up with a lot of woo-woo and spiritual and things which I don't think are helpful for what I'm trying to discuss, or at least talk about today. So I would say it's kind of complete awareness, but mostly categorize it as non-thinking, funnily enough. So here's a good analogy, or I suppose an example, where I'm sure we've all been in group situations before where something has come up and someone else is talking and we've thought of a fantastic joke. Now, I suppose like most people like me, you probably don't interrupt straight away whatever their sentence is thing and just blurt it out. You kind of go, oh, okay, this would be good, funny thing to say. Wait a couple of seconds until there's a slight pause or something and then say it. Now, there's a difference between doing that and then you saying it and the joke either, falls flat or hopefully does well. But it kind of is in the moment and you do this almost unthinkingly. You just say it. Now, probably we've all had an experience as well where we've thought of a joke, but someone's on a roll and it's just, we haven't been able to fit it in really quickly. And then we're kind of ruminating on this joke, and we want to tell it because it's a funny thing. We know it's going to go down well, but kind of the moment has passed, the opportunity has passed, and now we're we're stuck thinking about how can we tell this joke? How can I get this in? And by this time, we're past that point of non-thinking, and now it's kind of analyzing, trying to figure out, what moment can I fit this in the future? Maybe I should have said it in this point in the past. And I think this is a good kind of highlighting because it's a real simple one. Probably everyone's experienced something like this before. And it gets to that point of the non-thinking nature of things. When you're in a group situation, you just blurt out the joke, everyone's happy, everyone laughing. You're not thinking about it. But when you get stuck on the joke itself and how it could have been or how it will be, that I think is the analogy I'm trying to draw to here of living in the present or thinking in the present. And it's better to be in that moment where you just tell the joke rather than stuck in this weird in-between time where you're thinking about it and how it could have been or how it should have been. So jumping here onto, I suppose, just talking about meditation and roadblocks, this is typically how people will say, how do you live in the present moment? Well, meditation is typically what will come up as the example of how you can do that. So I'm not going to particularly try and argue for this. I think the science is pretty clear that meditation has almost all positive effects on people, whether it be for standard everyday humans, for people who are going through traumatic events, or for people who are even going through like final stage illnesses, cancer, and things like that. I think there's enough science out there saying meditation has some very good quality aspects to it. And maybe I'm just going to focus on instead some sticking points because I have meditated in the past. I still kind of do it a little bit here and there. And it is one of the things that didn't come naturally for me. I've found it a real struggle. And so this might be helpful for others who might say, okay, I'm not living in the present. Maybe I want to try meditation. Okay, what are some things that I'm going to struggle with or I have struggled with? And maybe here's some of the roadblocks which I think you can kind of get over. So the wishy-washy nature of spiritualism and mysticism, I think, is pretty much the biggest one for those of us living in a Western country where religion isn't the dominant, all-consuming factor that it used to be, and perhaps even for people in other countries where I traveled Colombia and a lot of Latin America, and whilst there was certain aspects of Catholicism and religion there, I didn't think it was as strong as perhaps I was expecting it would be. And I would just say there are secular resources for learning about meditation, and I'll talk about some of these a little bit later. But I don't think it needs to get trapped up into Buddhism or religion or anything like that. I think you can, or even some of the more new agey type of ones, looking at things like The Secret or different types of sex and things that can come up, or the hippie type of vibe or things like that. No, I think if you really want to, you can find resources which are really, okay, strip away all of the extra, things coming from the universe or stuff like that. And it's just what is the pure action that is required into taking into meditation. What are the steps that you can take to try and find this present moment, I suppose, and be able to think in this present moment or achieve this non-thinking, which is it's kind of the same thing. It's a hard topic to really nail down with words. So there's definitely some secular resources. When you start feeling like nothing is happening is to be expected. 100% whatever your anxieties are, I think it will actually even make it worse for a little bit. So if you are stressed out at things at work, if you've got a newborn baby who's constantly crying and you're just not getting any time to yourself because you're with your partner all the time, this is something that could be happening to Juan at this very moment. I think there are ways where it's you try out meditation, and if you haven't tried it out before, what you'll find is you're just going to be sitting there and you're just giving more access to the thoughts on your head to just run around wild. Typically, this is said as the monkey mind. The monkey mind is going crazy. What I think might be useful to know is everyone goes through the stage where I think it'll get worse. You'll feel perhaps even more anxiety. You'll feel like you're not doing it right. You'll feel that it's just magnified, and now you don't even have distractions taking you away from the craziness that is going on in your mind, or the inability to kind of shut off. And so just knowing that kind of everyone is going through this, and that you are likely to experience it, perhaps even a an increase in your anxiety or worry, because now you've just added an extra thing that you suck at, or that is taking time away from your day and whatnot to put on top. Um, One which typically comes up, and you'll hear this in a lot of podcasts, kind of like the Chris Williamson or Sam Harris or things like this, where or even people who just talk about meditation, is I do it daily. I'm doing it. I got to do my 20 minutes of meditation in the morning or in the evening. As it kind of gets trapped up in this, I would say, productivity hacking sort of culture, which you hear a lot of. I've got to do, I've got to do this. I do this, and then I start off my morning strong, and then I go for a 10-hour bike ride and crush the day, and I wake up at 2 a.m. Because everyone else is sleeping, and like winning the day, sort of winning the morning sort of deal. I don't think that's a helpful way, particularly of framing it a lot of the time. What I've noticed is, over the years that I've kind of learnt about meditation and used it as a tool, is it has helped me here and there, but just here and there. I don't need to do it all the time. I don't need to do hours and hours. Now, if you've listened to the Mere Mortals for long enough, you'll remember that I think it was in 2021, I set a goal for myself of doing a meditation retreat for 6 days. And so I kind of rented a little Airbnb granny flat type place, shut myself in, and I would meditate 8 hours a day, do some reading, eat, and that was it. That was all I was doing that whole time. No human contact or nothing. And in preparation for that, I was doing a lot of meditation, probably getting up to an hour to 2 hours a day or something like that. Now, how did I need to keep that? Do I need to continue doing that? No. What I actually found was, at some point, you are just creating more suffering for yourself by doing this, by sitting down for hours on end and, feeling the pain running up through your ass, and then you try and meditate your way out of this thing that you are causing to yourself. So whilst there, I think it is useful to maybe have a daily practice, at least for a while. It's not something that, if you start, it's now, okay, from now until the day that I die, I'm going to meditate 20 minutes a day, or 10 minutes a day, or an hour a day. I think it's totally fine to jump in and out of these things and use it as a tool. You don't have to use it all the time. If things are going great in your life, if you're not feeling anxiety or worry, and if you are having enough time where you are content and non-thinking and just living in the present moment and enjoying it, I don't think you need to have to do it. So that's just one. It can come and go, I think. And then the final roadblock is, like anything, if you practice it, you will get better. So to get over that initial hump that I was talking about before, I think just practice. Unfortunately, no one wants to hear this, but practice is the thing that will help out, that will get you to that next little bit. And if nothing else, you've lost a little bit of time. If you're one of the rare ones for who meditation doesn't work, if I had to put a number on it, of the kind of amount of people who just by their personality, look, this is completely unscientific. I'm just making this up on the top of my head and based off experiences I've talked about with people and just in real life. I would say, I don't know, I think it would work for 90% of people, maybe 95%. And that there's just a certain subset of people who maybe are a bit too hyperactive, who have a bit too much energy, where sitting down and formally meditating is not the way to go. And perhaps they will find it in a more active pursuit, or with music, or moving the body in certain ways. So yeah, just, I would say, there's, in terms of losing out on things, of trying a new hobby, of looking foolish or silly or something like that, there's no real barriers, other than you lose a small portion of time, because you can do it in a room, locked away. No one needs to know about it. No one needs to see about it, and it's just you. So I think that's some of the roadblocks of meditation, and why Not particularly why it's useful. I don't think I'm the best person at explaining that, but if you've heard enough other people explaining it and you think it might be worth giving a try, here's some of the roadblocks and stuff that might you might encounter. Some resources for knowing more, I think, about these things. I've already mentioned the Chris Will X, I believe, is his YouTube channel. Modern Wisdom is his podcast. He's got a couple of. He talks about it interspersedly, which is nice. It's not his main focus. I think for the main focus, listening to someone like Sam Harris has been pretty influential for me. He's got a podcast called Making Sense, and he also has an app called the Waking Up app, which I used for a fair period, and I thought it was pretty good. And he's got a lot of lectures and mini Zen type things, and he has some. He's very secular. He's kind of been anti-religion for a large portion of his life, and so if that is what is holding you back, I think he's a pretty good resource for that. And there's another guy actually called Dan Harris who has I think a podcast called 10% Happier, which is also relatively useful as well. I think a good friend to talk about these things as well. So this isn't necessarily the meditation aspect, but just getting things out of your head. What I've noticed with the podcast has been very useful for me is just doing a lot of things which I used to have a journal, for example. I would write down in this journal, and it was just a Word document, and it would just get stuff out of my head. And so it wouldn't get trapped in there, wouldn't get rebounding all the time. It was almost like the release through my fingers or coming out of my mouth here on the podcast has. I think that's probably the best way to do it. You just release it. There's some thoughts, if you get it out, they don't need to stay in there. I don't know why that is. It's a rather strange thing. But if you're letting stuff get stuck in your head, that is a surefire, like 10x guaranteed way to magnify your problems. So having a friend, having a resource of a diary or a journal or something like that to get that out, I think is a pretty useful thing to have and to experiment with. I've read a bunch of books on meditation. If you go onto the Mere Mortals Book Reviews channel and just scroll through the playlist, you'll find a bunch of these, some being Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. There's the Tao Te Ching. There's 3 Steps to Awakening. I think one of the earliest book reviews I did was on Joseph Goldstein's Mindfulness. I've read quite a few. I can't say that they've inspired me or captured me or actually even really helped me in any way. I think the better ways of learning about this, at least for me, was through listening to other people talking about it, because they can describe the experiences. I feel better in a verbal format, which is typically not what I find. Usually I find things more available whilst reading, but in this case, listening to them kind of free form has actually helped me understand a little bit more about meditation than other ways, or at the very least of being able to get things out of your own head. So that's just a couple of resources there. I'm going to talk a little bit now about the relearning as well, and I've found that it's almost like a constant relearning to relearn how to be a bit more present in the moment. And this will get, I suppose, into the happiness and contentment argument, which is something maybe it's not an argument. It's a explanation I think I find useful for explaining the world, which is happiness is a byproduct. It comes from other things, and chasing happiness in of itself is kind of a foolish pursuit. It's because it's not graspable. Every time you try and get after it, it dissipates or it changes or it morphs. And you typically find this when you do goal setting and you have this big goal that you're trying to get. Oh, I'm trying to get the 1-arm handstand, or I'm trying to get X amount of podcast downloads, or I'm trying to win this person's affection, or get this promotion, or earn this much money, or whatever it is. You get there, and then you realize it's not as good as you thought it would be. It hasn't solved all your problems. And if anything, it will alleviate maybe slightly some problems, but more than likely, it'll actually magnify them. oh, I've got so much more money. Oh, I need to be careful with this money now. Where do I invest it so that I don't lose this money? I've gained this person's affections. Oh, I've realized I now have to spend a lot of time to keep those affections. And oh, this podcast, it's gotten to this level. Oh no, now there's a responsibility. There's a lot of people tuning in. It could just magnify. Oh, I've reached this level of handstanding. Oh, I'm gonna get old sooner, and it's getting even harder. And I'm gonna lose this thing which I once had. Like, curse you heavens. So I definitely think that contentment is something that is a better thing to focus upon, because you can be content but not necessarily happy. What I would say that I've been experiencing in the recent period has been, I haven't been content and I haven't been happy either. I've been neither of those things, but I have found moments in my life in the past, particularly when traveling, and you go through all sorts of mishaps whilst traveling and whatnot, and you can be and have family members. My grandmother passed away whilst I was traveling. There's all sorts of things which can make you unhappy, but if there's this kind of inner core of, I would just call it free of stress and anxiety, pretty much. And what I found was, okay, I think it's better to focus on something like contentment. If you need to focus on something, if you're trying to solve this, what you would call a negative situation, and typically this is embodied by not living in the present. The worries, anxieties, and whatnot, they come because you are thinking about the past or thinking about the future. It's kind of hard to worry about something that is happening in the moment, because it's just in the moment. You're just living it. And so focusing something on more like contentment, of having this, I hope people understand the word choice here. I feel for me, contentment is more a long-term thing. It's maybe not, it doesn't have the highs and peaks that something like happiness would, or sadness. That those two, what's the opposite of contentment? Well, I guess discontent. And that to me doesn't scream out to me as being a huge low or a huge high. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. And I find this is just a better way of thinking about it, and it's something you can move closer towards, and it's not going to have this dissipating effect where you think you've reached it or you've hit this goal or whatnot, and then it just disappears, floats away into the wind and whatnot. So I think this, coming back to the relearning aspect, which was the portion I was trying to get at, I think there's something about relearning how to find contentment, which it doesn't stick. You can't, it's not, this isn't one of those problems you can just solve and it's done. And why is this? I think it's something to do with life, and life is infinite variations of distractions, of moving you away from the present moment, of and I think contentment is kind of living in the present moment, or thinking in the present moment, which is almost non-thinking. And this is how, I suppose, the relearning is knowing, okay, there's so many distractions from this. You have a new baby, you have a new job, there's whatever it is, your car's been working perfectly for all this time, and then you get a flat tire, or now the airbag system is constantly, over the last couple of months, continually cropping up with the same error message. Yes, hands up, that's what's been happening to me. There's so many infinite varieties of distractions that I think you need an infinite varieties of reminders to go, okay, you're worrying about this car problem. How about you just go, okay, put some plans in place to affect that. Sure, fix that problem. Go to get your car serviced, but you don't necessarily then need to think, oh, okay, but it's, what if they can't fix it? Then I'm going to have to do this, and creating a whole bunch of imaginary situations, which can be useful sometimes. And I'll get into that a little bit in the downside section of living in the present moment. But I think for the most part is unhelpful. How many situations have you created in your own mind which have never eventualized? and how many have you created which have worked out pretty much exactly as you thought they would? For me, if I had to put a rough number on it, I would say it's probably 1 in every 10,000 or 1 in every 1,000 or something like that. The amount of variations my mind can come up with of situations and how I'm going to respond to it and how I'm going to handle it is so large, and I don't think it's actually prepared or helped me for any of that. And so this is why it's that relearning. You got to remember, like, oh, this thing that you're thinking about, it's probably not going to work out the way you thought it would, and let's just try and find a bit of contentment in the present moment. Let's just not stress out too much about this thing. Let's not worry too much. What I've found is some things will almost inevitably prompt you, trigger you, provoke you into this mind state where you are having more worries and anxieties. And so I'll get a little bit personal here for me, which is getting rejected by women in particular in kind of the dating scene. So I'm single, and I've been single for a long time, since 2020, something like that. And the thing was, I wasn't particularly looking for a partner in 2021, 2020, 21, even parts of 2022. And, that was just, dealing with a breakup, COVID, a whole lot of other stuff was going on in my life. I wasn't particularly looking for a partner. Now that I am, and I am trying to find someone who is kind of, I want to spend a lot of time with, create a relationship, hopefully lasting into the, long, long future. There is something about getting rejected which kind of hits to the core of me. And it's really weird because I can get rejected from other things. Asking people onto the podcast, you get either no response, or you get a response that's negative, or you get a maybe. And, every now and then you'll get a yes, hell yeah, let's do it. The rejections that I get in that area, in that arena, they don't affect me at all. It's kind of just like, okay, all right, that person doesn't want to talk. Oh, it's not going to work. That's fine. But there's something about chatting with girls, with trying to find a partner, which just turns my mind into this mush of criticism, of self-reflection, of negative thought patterns. And so the thought patterns will usually go something like this. Didn't meet a girl, like chatted with a girl, nothing happened from it. That's fine. Usually it's in that kind of present moment where the rejection happens or something. I don't feel too bad because I know, I just put in a little bit of work to try and find it. I'm getting out, whatnot. I'm actually making an effort. What happens typically is afterwards, whether it be in the evening, whether it be the next day or a couple of days later, I remember that situation. I remember a date that just fizzled out, or I remember a weird interaction where I chatted with a girl and she was on her phone half the time and barely responding and whatnot. And I look at myself and I go, oh, you're a loser. She didn't want you because you're bald or you're old or whatever. You're not successful. You don't have money. You don't have blah, blah, blah. And it's all of these weird ass random things, which are almost certainly not the reason for it. It could have been what I was wearing. Could have been she almost, and I'm even doing it right now. It's always chucking it on me, whereas there are plenty of variations of why she wouldn't have responded to me, which have nothing to do with me. Things are going on in her life. She's not in the right place. She has a partner. She has this, blah, 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 blah. And so it is this kind of thing where I always look at myself. And so I don't know why this is, perhaps because it's one of those things where I take the responsibility of something went wrong. What did I do? How could I have made it better? Whereas I think a lot of people will go, oh, that was weird. Why did they do that? Why did they respond like that? That's a weird thing for them to do. And it's almost like in my own mind, I believe that implicitly, without me, if I let it slip, if I don't think about it, that every interaction could go well, could be a positive one, if I just knew the certain way of speaking, if I just had this type of body language, if I had just presented myself in this manner, which is absolutely insane. You can't be friends with everyone. That's not how the world works. And so for me, it is this. There's this one prompt. This is the thing that always gets me. It's like surefire, guaranteed. The times where I have had a partner in my life, sure, I might have had some anxiety, some worries, some things related outside of the relationship, but it hasn't been this kind of thinking of the future, thinking of the past, and going, man, this is it would have been ideal. I remember back in this time in my life when I was meeting girls and it was so easy. Or I remember, this time in the future where if I just got more successful, or if I just did this thing, or if I improved in these ways, then I could do this, and they would respond in these ways. And it's like, no, Kyrin, it doesn't work like that way. Why do you keep coming back to this? And yeah, I think there is a relearning. There's a constant relearning, and some things will make it worse for you. And your situation might be the same as mine. More likely, it's going to be another thing very peculiar to you, which is related to perhaps some psychological thing in the past. Perhaps for me, it was going through my teenage years and just having a long period of social anxiety of not being talking to girls, which has kind of cemented something in my brain. Who knows? But I think there is a relearning aspect. And so if you think that you've got it forever and you'll always be able to live in the present moment, and those anxieties, those worries won't crop up again, I think that's kind of probably setting yourself up for failure, because something will change, something will happen in the future, which will draw it back out. And so just having some reminders and whatnot is useful. Let's jump on to the downsides. And this is where there's a trend I've noticed amongst people. And so just for those who don't know, I'm kind of, I suppose, alternative in many ways. I have traveled around a lot, so I kind of mixed with a lot of backpacker crowds. I don't have the typical 9-to-5 job. I typically hang out with people who also don't have the typical 9-to-5 job. So they will be, personal trainers with varying hours. There'll be people who maybe have a standard job, perhaps, but their identity isn't tied to that, and their identity is much more in yoga or meditation or a physical pursuit or being an artist or something like that. And what I've noticed with the people who are more into living in the present moment of contentment and enjoyment is, I don't think they accumulate wealth in the same way that people who are striving do. And I haven't used the striving word that much, but striving is definitely one of those ones where it's useful because you are putting into actions and getting after things for a future state. In particular, I'm striving to be more wealthy. I'm striving to get this skill or unlock this thing or get this object or whatnot. And that aspect of goal setting is very useful. And on the Mere Mortals here, Juan and I talk about goal setting once a month, and even more often than that, because we have long-term goals that we talk about and things like this. And there is a certain aspect of that which is really useful. And this is getting into probably the balance section, where I think having goals and striving and whatnot is fantastic. It can solve a lot of problems. And so one of the things that can happen is, if you don't have a lot of material wealth, then problems which material wealth solves, rent, of being able to travel, of go places, of unexpected car issues, of unexpected expenses and things like this, they are just solved because you have the material wealth. Bam, pay for it. Don't even need to worry about it. Don't even need to think about it. So there is this weird cycle where you can get trapped in which is living more in the present moment. So I'm just able to enjoy things. I don't need to strive after a new goal, a new car, a new whatever. But then you start to have some worries or anxieties that can kind of be caused by not having that material wealth to then, dissipate that problem away. And then you're having to use you're living in the present moment to kind of mask over that anxiety and worry and whatnot. So I think there is a balance, definitely, where, look, not everyone in the world can be a Buddhist monk and just chill out all day in a monastery, because, well, then nothing, we would all starve, because someone needs to farm the land, someone needs to till and collect the fresh water and create the plumbing and things like this. And so obviously not everyone can do this. There's a reason why they jump into monasteries and whatnot, because typically it is much, much harder to find that living in the present moment when you are more connected with the world, because that material stuff is very useful. And if you don't have it, if you are the Zen monk living in the middle of New York, trying to pay rent and be a Zen monk in New York or in Manhattan or something is going to be really, really hard. So I think there is this kind of cycle that you can kind of get trapped into if you take it too far, I suppose. And one of the other aspects is I suppose, when taken too far, it can be a justification for not alleviating suffering as well. So if you start going, okay, I can meditate my way out of this problem, I can, that cancer or whatnot, or that child crying in the background of the other room, I can find a tranquility in the present moment by just listening to the sounds, by hearing what's coming in, by not attaching judgments to them, or just what is the quality, the qualia, if you've heard of that word before, which is, what is the kind of the experience of red? What is that? And is my experience of red the same as other people's red? What if I actually went into their eyes? I could jump into their brain, and then their red actually looks more like a purple to me, because just of the way that their eyes input and their brain processes data. Oh wow, that's weird. That's strange. And so you can kind of use this aspect to take away the bite from the things that annoy you. That chainsaw out the window, the ants crawling over your body or biting you, the mosquito itch that you have on your leg, the the whatever lump that's appeared on your body, or the I don't know, nose hair that's growing out, or whatever it is. There is a way of dissipating these problems, and if you take it too far, maybe it would be better to just go feed the child in the next room that's crying. Maybe it would be better to go to the doctor and get that lump checked out. Maybe it would be easier to trim the nose hair. Maybe it would be better to put some pesticide around so ants aren't getting into your house, and putting up some mosquito nets. So I think there is this thing where just because you can kind of take away the pain of the suffering and whatnot, I think that it is useful to have that striving aspect to go, no, fuck it, I'm going to try and solve this problem so I don't have to deal with these things in the future. A couple of other little random thoughts that I thought of, the downsides perhaps of living too much in the present moment. Your total life might actually feel shorter. So what typically happens when you're living in the present moment, whether it be playing a soccer game, when you're absolutely absorbed, enthralled in this music, or in whatever it is that's giving you in this conversation, in this podcast, hopefully, there's a thing where it'll feel like it just goes away. I happened this recently. I was helping my brother out with some painting of walls, and 4 hours, 5 hours can just pass by a flash when you get in this routine of getting the roller out, dipping in the paint, putting it in here. It can pass by so quickly because you are just focused on this one aspect. Maybe you have some music playing in the background. Maybe you're chatting at the same time. But there is this kind of monotonous thing where you can get into, and then time is just going by. That is a great example for me, I think, of living in the present moment. You're just doing the thing. You're not worrying about, is this paint going to dry too quickly, or will we have it ready in time for the new tenants to move in, or something like this. And I suppose if you lived every moment of your life like that, your life would just not, it would just go so quick, because every day would feel like an hour instead of the 12 hours, which sometimes happens when you are worrying about something. You're in a doctor's waiting room and it's only been 10 minutes and you think it's been 40 minutes. So I think there can be an argument as to, if you live in the present moment too much, your life goes by really, really, really quick. And then you don't have, I don't know, is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? Because when you're worrying, it's you're spending more time in a negative state, but you also have more time. That subjective feeling of more time. Bit of a weird one there. So I think, yeah, maybe there's a justification for that. Obviously, the slippery slope into woo woo. So if you are looking to live more in the present moment, a lot of other things can get attached to that. Claims about the universe, claims about reality, claims about what actually goes on inside the human brain, of what is consciousness, of what is, I think there's so many additional things that can get caught up into this if you are trying to figure out what, live more in the present moment, especially on the meditation side of things, the mysticism, the spiritualism. They go hand in hand. A lot of that stuff really gets into it, which, if that is up your alley, if that helps you live in the world, if that makes things better for you, great, fantastic, go ahead. No judgments on my part here. It's when those things don't serve you, when you get trapped into a cult, and just because this guy is a very good meditator or is charming or something like that, and has some insights into living in the present moment, looking at you, Osho, then that can be a justification for him taking all your money and having one of the largest Rolls-Royce collections in the world. Okay, well, is that exactly what you wanted? If you could look back in the past, is that exactly the thing that you were aiming for and would have said is the best outcome? Nah, probably not. Probably not. The last one was getting confused about pleasurable things being done out of avoidance. So I was talking before about, living in the present moment can be playing that game of soccer, can be playing that video game, can be having sex, can be eating that nice food. When those things are done out of avoidance, I think it has a sour quality to it at the end of this. I used to do this a lot in my teenage years, where I got really into reading manga or watching anime or playing soccer and things like this. It would give me a temporary respite from the problems that I was having with women, of not being able to talk to them, of just not feeling like I was needed or loved. And whilst those things gave me that respite, I think there was a sour quality to them, where I could enjoy them to the fullest extent, because a certain part of me knew I was using this to avoid this other pressing issue which I needed to solve, which was, Kyrin, you're not getting out. You're not participating in the world. You're not joining groups. You almost never interact with women. And if you do, it's not in a sexual way, and in a way which will lead to you finding a partner and having dates and things like this. And so all of these things that I was doing, well, they're fun, sure. They gave me some pleasure, but I don't think there was that contentment aspect to it. I think there was still a underlying simmering thing of, I'm doing this because I don't want to focus on what's actually causing me a lot of problems in my life. So that's the discontentment, some of the downsides which perhaps can come from living in the present moment. Let's jump into the summary. And I think for me, a good life consists of avoiding needless stress and anxiety. The overarching, high level view looking down, needless stress and anxiety. There's going to be times where you have stress and anxiety and there's nothing you can do about it, where it's part of parcel of whatever is happening in your life, of worrying about your baby crying. I think that's a good thing to uh, deal with that problem and try and fix that problem. Yes. The aspect, I suppose, is the needless part. And this is probably where most of the things that you think are problems, and I chuck myself 100% into this category. So don't think this is me preaching from a high horse. This is me down in the trenches with the rest of us and trying to sort out my own bullshit. So much of thinking tends to create worry, which is the most useless of emotions, of getting stuck into this could happen, that might happen. And worry typically doesn't spur action. it doesn't typically spur you to go, oh, I'm going to fix this thing and then I'm going to stop worrying, because that's all you can do, right? If you're worrying about something in the future, it's typically because that you haven't put in place the action that could solve it. And then there should be no need to worry. Worry is this really weird thing where you're worrying about things where you can't even change. I'm worrying about, my child might get cancer in the future, or I might get this certain disease that my parents had, or, list the whole list of all those examples I gave beforehand. Worrying about something which you can't change is so futile, and yet we do it all the time. And this is where I think that living in the present moment and trying to find that contentment at the very least can take the edge off that, if not allow you to see through the illusion that worry actually is, where it's no, I can either do the thing and stop it. So, if I'm walking down the stairs and I'm worrying about, oh, I might drop my laptop because I'm carrying it with one hand, well then, put the laptop down, put that other thing you were carrying down, pick up the laptop, carry it with two hands, walk down the stairs, go get the other thing later. That's the sort of thing which should happen, but no, what typically happens is you just worry about you balancing it and you continue to do the thing. So that's I suppose for me why one of the reasons why I'm talking about this living in the present moment. It's useful to cutting through the bullshit of the needless stress and anxiety that can come up. So having an outlet, I think, is of some sort is critical. I talked about meditation. I talked about just straight up getting things out of your head with a friend or with a journal or things like that. I talked about how perhaps doing it through some sort of activity which can get you into this state, playing soccer, watching video games, watching movies, having sex, whatever it is for you that gets you into painting walls, whatever it is that gets you into that. I think having an outlet of some sort is good. What I would also add is meditation is probably the quickest bang for your buck. Let's take Juan's example. So he's had a child recently. He's going to be at home with his little baby girl, Vienna. He's going to be at home with his partner. He's not going to get a whole lot of alone time. And there's probably going to be days where he doesn't get a moment to himself. Now, how does he typically have a meditative aspect? Well, for him, he doesn't find any joy, pleasure of sitting down, and it makes things worse for him. He's maybe one of the 10 or the 5% I was talking about. For him, it's going to the gym. Now, what does going to the gym involve? Well, it involves getting into gym clothes. It involves driving there, and it involves warming up. So it's going to take him, 30 minutes minimum to get into that zone where he can find that little bit of release from the pressure of the constant things happening with the new baby girl and with his partner. And this is where I think handstand is the quickest bang for your buck. Almost all those other things I mentioned, playing a soccer game, doing handstands for me, even music. I was listening to this thing recently. It was actually that I mentioned in the Pete Smithson episode of that conversation with Rick Beato and Ted Gioia, I think, where Ted was saying there's this aspect of music, and modern music doesn't get into it because all the songs are these 2 to 3 minute songs. You actually kind of need 10 minutes to get into the rhythm, and this is why you'll see a lot of melodic rhythm drums and things that you'll find in tribal cultures. It does take a longer time to get into this rhythm, to get into the mood of the Zen-like state that can come. And not handstands, with meditation, if you practice enough, and you can do it really quickly, and you can get into this kind of zone within a couple of seconds, and this zone will maybe then give you, you only need to be in it for 5 minutes, no matter how busy one is at home. If he can find 5 minutes to just sit down on his own and get into this zone, if he was willing to put in the time, practice, energy to getting a little bit better at meditation, at the practice of meditation. So I think that's one of the reasons why meditation is a nice one, because it allows you to get into that, finding that non-thinking state of living in the present moment, whatever it is that bites through the normal day-to-day anxiety, worry, whatever it is that's going on, it's one of the quickest ways I think you can do it, and it's accessible anywhere. So that's one of the reasons why I think a lot of people talk about it. The final thing for that is, barring that, if you don't want to do any of these things, just be on the lookout for the stuff that really triggers it. So for you, for me, it's the approaching, it's being single, it's getting rejected by women. Whatever it is that's drilling you into comparisons and focusing on what could have been or what might be. The thing about looking in the future and the past is that, as I mentioned, it's always idealized. You never remember the negative stuff that was going on at that same time, which is exactly what's happening now. I remember all these times where, if only I had a partner, all the things in my life would be good. No, it doesn't work like that. And so it's just a reminder, whatever it is that is triggering it for you, just be on the lookout for that, because some things will drag you into these states maybe out of the state of contentment, out of the state of having a little bit of peace and tranquility, of that 5 minutes or 10 minutes that you can create on a day, which will give you a little bit of a respite from the rest of the planning, striving, working towards things in the future, which typically happens in modern life. So I think I'll end it there for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. This is a Value for Value podcast, and I do hope you got some value from this. Typically, we call out how you can support the show and how all the things that you can do with boostergrams and stuff like that. Today, I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I mentioned the Mere Mortals book reviews a fair few times. This is perhaps something you haven't heard about. We do indeed have another podcast, which is book reviews, typically about 20 minutes in length, of varying topics. For me, I get into classic literature, but I also read some modern books. And if you go into that podcast or the playlist for that, you will see on YouTube, you will see that there is an eclectic mix. And if you just scroll through, you will find some which are related to meditation, of living in the present moment. Funnily enough, none of the meditative books have actually helped. You know what actually did help of get me enthralled living in the present moment? Reading a book like Lost Horizon by James Hilton, one of my top 10. That is a book that was so engrossing, so enthralling, that I would lose track of time, that would get me in that non-thinking state. So that's a little call out there for checking out the Mere Mortals book reviews. Other than that, if you want to share this with a friend, if you want to suggest some comments of how I can make the audio better, of topics that you might like to hear about, please just send that in via any of the forms. There's a whole list of links down below. And other than that, we'll leave it there for today. Ciao for now. Kyrin. Oh.